Welcome to Wallbreakers, a podcast by emerging creatives for emerging creatives, presented by the Digi60 Filmmakers Festival. I'm your host, Bernice Romero De Gracia, a scriptwriting graduate from Algonquin College and an emerging content creator. From one emerging creative to another, the biggest creative block is breaking into a competitive industry. How can we break down those walls and root a stable foundation for our passion? Here at Wallbreakers, we sit down with Canadian artists to chat about the challenges they face in establishing a creative career and advice they have for those who have yet to embark on this journey. In this 5th episode, I sit down with Aicha Lasfar, a visual artist and filmmaker. Aisha's French-Canadian and Muslim culture illustrates her background in visual art and pyrography. This has led her to the world of filmmaking, where she explores her creative identity through this visual medium and was given a microgrant by Digi60 for BIPOC and Francophone filmmakers. In this episode, Aisha shares her experiences with womanhood and how we can maximize personal experiences in shaping one's technical visual film style. Hello, Aisha.
Hi, Bernice.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really excited to be talking to you on the podcast. Yeah. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
So I wanted to start by asking you, how did you first get into visual art?
As long as I can remember, I was just a very creative kid, and visual arts was always like a very accessible form of self-expression and escapism. I had a very OG childhood without internet or screens or anything like that. So whenever you were bored, it's like, here's some crayons and here's some paper or some Play-Doh. And I would just, go crazy with that. And I think it just always stayed with me. I never grew out of it. It's always something that brings me a lot of peace. And it's so integral to who I am, to do visual arts. I can't imagine me not doing it.
How did it influence you growing up when you started realizing more specific things that you wanted to do? It was more than just a hobby or something that interested you. It's I feel like this is something that I could do for a living.
I think the turning point when I actually turned visual arts into a small business was when I was living my life as a homemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed some kind of outlet because at the time I was fully immersed in being a housewife and fully dedicated my life to being at home with my kids, and that is an amazing thing to use your time for.
Yeah.
But I had all this creative energy that just was broiling inside me and just had no outlet. And I discovered a form of artwork called wood burning or pyrography. I just came upon it on Pinterest or Instagram or something like that. And I was like, that seems like a really cool art form that I want to try. So I started as a hobby. I was putting it on my socials just to let my friends and family know what I was up to. Oh, look at this artwork that I made. And very quickly people started asking if I was going to start selling it. And I was like, well, if you're asking, yeah, absolutely. I could use some pocket money, So I started slowly selling my artwork and realizing that there was a market for it. So that's when I realized that this is a thing that you can do. And also through the internet, I saw so many other small business owners, either through something like Etsy or their own websites or directly through Instagram, visual artists who were able to make that their full-time gig. And that was very inspiring. And it's definitely a route that I was pursuing for a while.
It's kind of related, not really, but you mentioned that you grew up in an age where the internet wasn't really a thing back then. And I can... I'm a Gen Z, but I can relate to that too because I'm grateful that I didn't grow up depending so much on digital media because we didn't really have that as much as we do now, where kids nowadays spend their time but just playing on digital mediums. But I was able to just immerse myself too in forms outside of that and getting hands on with stuff, whether it be drawing, or I remember I had a really vast collection of dolls, and I would it's a little embarrassing to admit, but I would make mini films with my dolls and everything.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's definitely a way to get started in film.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I don't have those films anymore, those videos that I edited anymore, but I would just edit them on iMovie with just the default effects that they
Yeah.
would provide. But yeah, that's kind of how I started too, and just like really like playing with it. And I'm glad that I think it was like a blessing that I kind of had that balance between like the digital age just starting to really like take off, but it wasn't really something that kids my age depended on too much, at least not as much as like
Not as bad as how it is now.
yeah, not as bad as how it is
No,
now,
same
definitely.
with my generation as well. It's like I feel like we got best of both worlds. I definitely had like the pure childhood without the screen obsession.
Yeah.
But I was like 16, 17 when YouTube was popping off and
Yeah.
being there for the original pure YouTube
No,
without ads and
yeah.
monetization. I miss those days
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
What other personal experiences like influenced you to choose a creative career?
Again, it's so integral to who I am as a person that I don't know, like it's so enmeshed with
Yeah.
how I process the world, that for me I knew that my career would have to be something in the creative field, whether it's to continue selling my art or go to school to be a graphic designer or interior designer or something having to do with expressing myself visually or through the arts, because it's everything that I do, it's everything that I am.
Yeah.
Not to sound a little hoo-ha, but like
Yeah,
it really
yeah.
is. Like I try, there are parts of me sometimes that I'm like, it would be simpler to just kind of go down the 9 to 5 route and do what a lot of people do, or like my siblings kind of like having like that safe, kind of pipeline of like you go to school, you get a degree, you get a job in that degree, and you have security.
Yeah.
There's definitely something very attractive in that, like to have that stability. But at the end of the day, I know that I would be in a job that's not related to the arts and always just be kind of like so restless and, wanting to just get back to it. And I know that I wouldn't be happy in any kind of other job. So I kind of have to make this work.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this is the only thing I want to do, so I have to make this work. Yeah. And you mentioned that you're a mother, and like just motherhood, I guess, like it's a big responsibility, because I currently live with my sister-in-law, and like I really do see like how much time it takes to raise a child, and that can get in the way of other things that you really want to do. And that's why some people like delay motherhood, or they don't want to be mothers at all, but just not just with motherhood, but just that as just being a big part of womanhood, like in general. Like how is that shaped like your artistry?
For me, again, doing my art was something that I did when my children went to sleep. Also because you don't want to be wood burning with toddlers running around. It's just not safe. So it would be my ritual for myself. I would put them to bed, and right away even though I would be exhausted from a day of being a mother or whatever it was, I was just so happy to, kind of go in my office and put on my music and get lost in my, my daydreams while doing the pyrography. And for me, I always saw it as a good thing, because you want your children to be raised around multidimensional women. I think that really serves them in the end, to have a mother who has her own life, her own personality, her own interests, and so that they're raised knowing that women are multifaceted beings, and that they're not just servants.
Yeah.
And not taken for granted as just, mom is the one who does the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning and sometimes takes me to the park. Like, mom is also, a badass who does her own stuff on the side.
Yeah. No, I definitely.
That's her own life.
Yeah. And it's especially now, like I'm really happy that, I mean, there's still such a long way to go in terms of like female representation, and specifically like in the creative industry, but there's still also like a lot of progress that's like been made. And I'm happy to see that female representation just keeps on growing, and it's just becoming more normalized now too. So like, how has being a woman like informed your artistic direction?
Honestly, I've been on a bit of a crazy personal journey where I was living that very traditional life, and not just in terms of gender roles, but I was also raised very very religious and conservative. So I was the whole package. I was like I was living that very like religious, culturally traditional housewife role.
Yeah.
And I lived that life and I got to experience that. And then I very consciously stepped away from that and am now living life on the other side as well. And I feel like that is really informing my, like, a wider picture of life as a modern woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely informs my art and what I want to be doing in the future, especially with film.
Mm-hmm.
It's really exploring the ins and outs of womanhood in these different roles. And I think
Yeah.
that we're at a very crucial point in our culture right now,
Mm-hmm.
where unfortunately there's still, if you're online, you might be seeing some spaces where these discussions, or rather really gross arguments, are still happening
Yeah.
with some characters that are having this like renewal of like very right-wing traditional, expectations of women and their roles and their place, and they're like trying to bring that back or something, and it's really kind of messed up.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a great time to explore these themes, and to show women as very complex and messy characters. That's something that really interests me.
Yeah.
Also in the themes of motherhood, because I think motherhood is heavily romanticized and glossed over, and
Yeah.
it's actually such a messy, messy, hard thing.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested in seeing more films and more stories told about motherhood. Not, I wouldn't say the dark side of motherhood, but being a bit more honest about
Yeah.
how difficult it can be, because I myself, was in some dark places sometimes where I was like, well, you never see this. Like, nobody ever talks about these aspects of motherhood. Therefore, it must just be me. Like, I am the problem. There's something insanely wrong with me as a person or as a woman. And then you go online and you read some blogs and you discover that, no, this is not just me. It's just that motherhood has been so romanticized, and
Yeah.
all these things have been so glossed over, that there are so many mothers like suffering in silence,
Yeah.
thinking that there's something deeply, deeply wrong with them. But it's just, no, like, we haven't really explored deeply these darker aspects of motherhood and these darker challenges.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays, when like everybody's so isolated and we have this like loneliness epidemic, and it really does take a village to raise a child.
Mm.
But so many women and parents out there are just on their own,
Yeah.
doing it kind of on their own, and that's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. A hard pill that not everyone's like ready to swallow yet is that, especially for women, is like not everyone is set out for motherhood. Like, it's not meant for everyone.
no.
And as women, we're raised to believe that being a mother is the peak of womanhood, which, like, that's changing nowadays. And some people still like can't accept that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm surprised too sometimes at the rhetoric, and how we still have such a long way to go. And I think it's easy to forget how much we still have to go, because movies are coming out like Barbie and
Yeah.
Poor Things, and look at the reaction that those movies are getting, actually, when I think an educated, well-rounded person will watch those movies and be like, yeah, this 100%,
Yeah.
and then you realize, no, actually it's somehow this is still contentious, and makes people debate and argue about these themes,
Yeah.
which honestly we should be so past by now, but we're not. This is still a discussion to be had, and I'm definitely interested in being part of that discussion.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to like seeing that and seeing you contribute to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I feel like even as like women who like we're trying to represent like our own kind, but that in itself like can be like difficult, because there's still narratives like that we've grown up with, like to believe. There's a term for it. I think it's like internalized misogyny.
Internalized misogyny,
Yeah,
yeah,
internalized
absolutely.
misogyny and stuff
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Sometimes like we still like there's still it's still like instilled like inside of us, like in
100%.
yeah, and like it's something that we're still like learning like to outgrow. Like we can say like as much as we want that, like, we're pushing for proper female representation,
Mhm.
right? But that's also difficult for like us as women. And I think the ironic thing is that like people expect us to be like perfect in the way that we represent. I think
Mhm.
just with the expectation of us like being like people putting expectations on just women in general and expecting perfection like from them. Like they expect us to know like everything about it and get it correct like in the first go. But like especially like with the stories personally that I'm writing now for my script writing program, it's challenging even as a woman to make female characters that don't fall into these unrealistic or untasteful tropes that we need to like grow out of, especially like in popular media. And like like as I was like I told you that I did like my pitching pitching practice for my program just recently, and it got me thinking about like, oh, I think like there's still things that I need to like go over in terms of the way that I represent my female characters, because I don't want them to be a wrong representation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, we internalize so much from the media that we consume, especially as children. So there's definitely a lot of like preconceived notions and tropes and cliches that you can easily fall into without even realizing, and you'll reread your script or you'll bounce the idea off with a friend. That happened to me recently with a friend. We were bouncing ideas for a script for a short film that they wanted to make, and we'd kind of say an idea and they'd be like, oh wait, no, we totally fell into that trope. Like, okay, try again, let's do it again. And not just with gender and womanhood and things like that, but also with race. And I like fell into the white savior complex so quickly without realizing. I was like, did I just do that? That's so embarrassing. Like, let's start from scratch. You know what I mean? So it's definitely something to be aware of when you're writing stories, is like, okay, am I falling into my own preconceived notions or tropes or things that I was exposed to, and kind of dissect that a little bit and be a little bit more intentional, for sure.
Yeah, because like one comment that I got for one of my pitches is like, because I have a female female who's this very like spontaneous, like adventurous person who wants to live like a nomadic life, and she gets into like she starts to develop feelings for someone who's the complete opposite of him, of her rather. And one of the comments that I got, because I wasn't able to put like a lot of like or give a lot of details about her character, because there's only so much that you can like fit into a pitch, and you're worried about fitting into that 5 to 6 minute like limit when you're pitching. It's like they were hoping that it wasn't like a manic pixie dream girl, and I was like, oh shoot, like I didn't want like that's not what I was intending to do, but like at the same time, like I'm glad that they brought that up, because like that's something that I wasn't really able to identify at first, and like it's not what I intended, like it's not how I intended to represent like the character. So again, those internalized like narratives that we have, and that we're still trying to break
100%.
past them.
We're not immune to it, and I think that's something I'm realizing even in my own personal journey recently, is that like, oh, there's so many things that I thought I was above. Like, I can't believe I'm this basic, but here we are. Like, I'm falling in the same trappings as, like, the rest of the population, because I'm human, too. And it's like sometimes you think you're above a certain thing, but you're like, oh, wait, no, I'm struggling with the exact same thing, or I have the same preconceived notions as a lot of people. And I think that's what personal growth is checking yourself, being like, oh, okay, I've fallen into the same trap as, like, everyone else, and that's fine. And let me give myself some grace here and try again and do better next time.
How would you say like your womanhood, like how do you represent that like visually? Are there certain styles or aspects of it?
I mean, that's something I'm grappling with on a personal level a lot recently, because I don't feel very feminine, to be honest with you. I just feel like I don't wake up in the morning thinking I am woman and I have risen. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just me, and it just so happens that I've been given this body, or this that I'm choosing to still identify with this gender, and it's just something that I'm thinking about a lot recently, just my own gender identity and fluidity, and how I like identify with all these things. So for me, I would say I'm definitely in my witchy era right now, very much in reclaiming the femme power
Yeah.
and the dark feminine
Yeah.
and the female rage and all that stuff, which again, we were talking about falling into tropes. And it's very tropey and cliche to have like gone through a separation and a divorce and
Yeah.
come out the other side being like, I'm a witch. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely going through that right now. And that's definitely influencing my artwork. I've been meaning to like design my own tattoo. I want like a sleeve
Oh, that's really cool.
with like, very like witchy kind of like femme figure. So I'm definitely feeling that energy right now. And I think it will be informing some of my artwork moving forward. My first short film actually was very femme and not very dark, but it opens dark. And does kind of play with the theme of like pregnancy and giving birth a little bit. So even my first ever production had a few of those elements in it.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in like pursuing that path and keeping things dark and keeping things femme.
No, that's awesome because gender is like it's fluid. Like it shouldn't be limited to just one thing or the other. It's just I still fall into that too, like trying to find like in terms of my femininity, like sticking to just one type of femininity or like or one thing and one identity.
Yeah, because that's another thing that's so ingrained in us. Is like femininity is this.
Yeah.
Being a woman looks like this. Being femme looks like this. And it's like, but I don't resonate with that at all. And I don't come across like that. And that's not my energy, but I still identify as a woman. So what does that mean? And, the entire just like gender discourse right now, like also is very, very interesting to me. And what does it even mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? And I'm raising my kids. They're both boys.
Oh.
And that's very important to me, too, is to be raising men in this world with innate respect for women.
For
the
women.
Bar is in hell, but that's where we are. It's just, that's my main concern still in 2024 is making sure that my boys have respect for women. That
Absolutely.
is the most important thing for me. Not just women, but anyone who's not a cisgendered straight white male, like just be respectful and just the basics, honestly.
I think personally, like for me growing up too, it's like I was trying to find like that the type of femininity I guess that I embody and that I had, but I think now in this stage of my life I'm enjoying and having fun with just being flexible with it, whether it's just being, again, it sounds really tropey, but just like playing with my like androgynous side too, or like balancing both my femininity and my masculinity.
Yeah. And you were talking about clothing before that you're really into fashion, and that's such a fun way to explore that.
Exactly.
There are some days I definitely dress more tomboyish or boyish or whatever the term is. Tomboy is such a like 90s term.
Yeah.
That's what I used to be called when I was growing up. I was the tomboy, and so there are days where I definitely still resonate with that energy, and there's other days where I feel a lot more femme, and it's just like, how do you, have fun playing with those sides of yourself?
Yeah. I mean, it was never meant to be that serious in the first place. We're just having fun. We're just having fun with it.
It's all kind of made up. So.
Yeah. But yeah, all of this taps into like how we perceive like the world visually and how we perceive ourselves visually, and in turn how it influences like our visual style like as creatives. So like I was hoping to hear you like explain more about how your personal experiences and your background in visual art has influenced your film style in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, film is definitely a visual medium. Movies are moving pictures, and I think that's just how I approach it is, it's a frame. And so for me, even in terms of painting, if I'm going to sit down with my watercolors, let's say, like I'm thinking very intuitively and with my feelings about like, well, this feels right. And the composition and the color theory and all these things kind of just honestly kind of come to me.
Yeah.
And I think in film it's the same thing for me. Like I'll look at a frame and be like, yeah, this feels right. And it's like, oh, no, let's like, slide a bit to the left or a bit to the right and let's center this. And, like for me, it's very much like painting, but with a camera and with the lights. It's cinematography is a lot of fun. And I had a lot of fun working closely with my cinematographer, Gehani, on my short film.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's definitely something. And for me also, film is first and foremost a daydream and a means
Yeah.
of sharing each other's daydreams and thoughts. You know, sometimes when you have an idea or a thought or like a mental picture and you wish that you could just transplant it and show it to someone else. I feel like that's what film does.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it's a daydream. It's a very specific vision that I have in my mind, and how can I translate this and share it with others? So it's definitely the visuals, you know, that get me, and that made me honestly really not even realize the importance of sound design until I
Yeah.
did my first film. And I was like, oh, and now I pay so much more attention to sound design
Yeah.
when I watch movies. When I went to see Dune 2 recently, I was just like blown away. I was like paying so much attention to the wonderful sound design in that
Yeah.
movie, because you are really building a whole world. And as a visual artist, I'm always going to be prioritizing and coming at it with that background.
Yeah.
But man, it's world building. You are
Yeah,
building a whole world for
definitely.
your audience.
Yeah. There's a lot of intricacies that go into it, because like that's also why like music is such a big part of my personal artistry, because I listen to a bunch of different genres, and like I like listening to like the different layers in each song and the way that it's produced, and just like hearing all of that, hearing all of those like intricacies within the production. It's like, especially like if there's a music video that's attached to it, it's definitely going to influence the way that you watch the music video, which like in terms of the bigger picture, like that influences to how we watch film. Like sound design like influences the way that we perceive the visuals.
But I'm
in the
interested,
film.
have you ever listened to a song a few times and really loved it,
Yeah.
and then went to see the music video and was so disappointed
Yeah.
with the music video?
I've definitely had like those experiences.
Yeah.
Like I love the song, but when I watch the music video, I'm just like, this could have had so much more potential
Yeah,
to. Yeah.
or this is just not what I pictured. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had my own music video to this in my mind, and it was perfect
Yeah.
to the beat, and now I'm watching someone else's interpretation of it, and I'm
Yeah.
like, it's just, no. That's
Yeah.
not what I was picturing.
Yeah.
I would love to get into music video shooting and directing for sure.
Me
It's
too,
something
actually.
I'm very interested in.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe we might like work on something together.
That'd be dope.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Yeah, but in terms of like visual aspect of things, like because your foundation with illustration and visual art, bouncing off of that foundation, like what aspects of filmmaking in terms of like developing your visual style, like how exactly did you start? Did you start with cinematography, like with videography, like color grading, post-production? Yeah.
Right. So I think one of the first steps definitely was working with my cinematographer to have a mood board. And I was
Okay.
just going online and looking for the perfect location and the mood that I was trying to set visually. So again, my film the opening was quite dark. I wanted to make the audience feel unsettled and not know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun shooting down like really dark hallways. And I feel like hallways are really fun because you can play around a lot with like composition and also like where the light is coming from. Is it coming from that door over there? Is it like, you know, like there's so many questions when you're just like staring down an empty, eerie hallway. I kind of love dark, eerie hallways, I guess. And those kind of like liminal spaces. So that's how I started the process for this short, for sure. Was just kind of trying to set like a mood board
Yeah.
with those kinds of pictures.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm coming at it from, you know, painting a painting and just kind of building that world visually.
Yeah.
And for me, location was a huge thing. My short film was also extremely dependent on location. So I guess to answer your question, from this, like my experience so far has been like working with location. It's like a huge part of it.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned like the process of making mood boards too.
Mhm.
Like that's one of my favorite parts, honestly, about making a film, like, or just because mood boards don't apply like to just films. Like it can apply to any creative project, but like it's just so fun to me to be able to put.
Well, because you see your project coming to life.
Yeah.
Like suddenly becomes so real
Yeah.
when you have a mood board, because you're like, oh, I'm seeing the colors, I'm seeing the vibe, like it's taking shape. So it's very exciting. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you always come from a daydreaming perspective whenever you're putting like a project together, and you really get to tap into that when you're making a mood board. And in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, not everyone, like, I guess not everyone is gifted or like skilled with that ability to see things visually. Like, some may just start as like writers or script writers in particular, but they don't really know like how to get their foot into visualizing their project or their film. So, like, what are your tips for creatives in terms of honing their visual eye?
Definitely photography. I think there's a huge reason why there's a big overlap between photographers and filmmakers, because sometimes you'll be wandering the world and you don't have a crew with you to capture everything of the moment. You can't capture the sound, you can't capture, whatever, but you can capture the mood visually. And again, movies are moving pictures, and
Yeah.
it's like, you need that composition, that eye for composition and for color and for being able to set the mood. And so my advice would definitely be to walk around with your camera, even if it's just your phone, and pay attention to what grabs your attention.
Yeah.
If you're just in a restaurant, or if you're walking down the street, or if there's something that catches your eye and you're like, oh, that's such a vibe. And it's like, pause and ask yourself, but why is that a vibe? Is it like the temperature of the color? The temperature of the light.
Yeah.
The color of the light itself. Is it the color of the set? Like, that's the thing. Like, walk through the world like it's a set, I guess. You're like, oh, this would be perfect for, a scene like this over here or like that, and kind of walking through the world like it's a movie.
Yeah.
And because it kind of is.
Yeah.
Reality's stranger than fiction. Is that the term?
Yeah, I think that's what it
Reality's
is.
stranger than fiction. A lot of the times it really is.
Yeah.
We are all living our own little movies. And so it's just like, pay attention to those movie moments in your life and what made it so cinematic, and try to capture that with your camera as much as you can, because it'll give you an idea of like all those things that make a good shot, like in a movie. Just again, composition, lighting, the basics. And that's another thing, like returning to the basics. I think especially for me, and the way my brain works is like, I get so excited about like the whole picture, that I can get lost in the sauce. And it's really helpful to take a step back and break things down to the basics. And what are the basics of filmmaking?
Yeah.
It's really like, it's the composition, it's the lighting, it's the color. So kind of like bring yourself back down to those elements if you're wandering the world and again, you see something really cool.
Yeah.
You're like, well, what makes it cool? And can I capture it with my camera? Yeah. And then that'll get you into the world of like lenses and all that kind of stuff, because you'll pull out your camera to capture it and then you'll be like, oh, it's not hitting. Like for some reason, I'm not able to get the same effect. It's like, oh, maybe you need a different lens then, So yeah, just start with the basics and keep an eye out for those cinematic moments.
So regarding your first film and your first filmmaking experience and everything, could you talk more about that, especially like with your experience with Digi60?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I owe so much to Digi60 because they made my first film happen. And that was another thing that I felt like, okay, this might never actually happen for me, because I was working in film as crew, which I love. And I was working on other people's movies. And I think like many crew members who are passionate about film, you're working on other people's movies and you're like, okay, hopefully one day it'll be my turn. But then also working as crew, you realize just how much goes into making a movie. And I was like, man, like, I don't know. Like, it's on my bucket list for sure. Like, I have to make a movie one day, even if it's just a short film. But like, how am I going to get started? Because it seems like really, really daunting.
Yeah.
And then there's Digi60. And Digi60 happened to have a microgrant program for BIPOC and Francophone creators. And you just had to apply and have a script ready. And it had to be French. It had to be a French-speaking movie, which I am. I'm Francophone. So I was able to jump on that opportunity. And I actually had a script ready, again, from all the way back to 2017, I want to say, when, once again, I was like in the middle of being a stay-at-home mom and film being such a like out of reach thing for me. But I would kind of record voice notes sometimes when I had a random idea for a script or a video. I would still record it because I'm like, one day I will get back into film and I'll be able to bring these ideas to life. And so I had this idea for like a little kind of funny sketch. In my mind, to be honest with you, it was going to be more of like a YouTube sketch, like video kind of
Oh,
thing.
I
That was
see.
the original intent for that script. But I was able to translate it into something that was more suitable for a short film. And I would not have been able to do it without, this kind of like giving me like a kick in the butt, like, hey, there's this opportunity, take it, because if you don't take this opportunity, who knows when you're actually going to motivate yourself to like make this dream happen. And, I didn't have any expectations. I just applied for the grant. I'm like, we'll see what happens. Before I know it, it's accepted. And I'm like, okay, I have this grant now. What am I going to do with it? And then I guess now I have to start looking for a location, and it's just like baby steps. And before I know it, like I have my first short film. And that goes back to what I was saying before about breaking it down to the basics. And sometimes making a film, no matter how big or small, seems like a mountain because you're like, right now I just have a script and now I'm supposed to like make a full-fledged movie. Like, this
Yeah.
is crazy. Where do I even start?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like really breaking it down to bite-sized tasks. It's like, okay, well, first, like, find your cast, and now you got to find your location, and now you got to find your crew. And it's just like breaking it down to assignments, and then before you know it, like, your film is happening and you're
Yeah.
on set and you're directing, and you may have had a panic attack in the bathroom before. And, and also like just, yeah, it gave me the freedom and the opportunity to experiment and to have that badge now, like,
Yeah.
and to get rid of the imposter syndrome, because I still have my little Digi60 card like on my wall that says Aicha Lasfar Filmmaker.
Yeah.
And I look at that every day and I'm like, yes, I've done a short film and it's real and I can call myself a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And then it just snowballs from there,
Yeah.
So I owe so much to Digi60 for making that happen and for kicking me in the butt to like make my first short film, get that title of filmmaker, and it's just all upward from here, So
There really are just like some people, like based on the like creatives that I've talked to, that it's really hard for them to get into the technical aspect of visuals and being able to nail down the nitty gritty of all of that, just because like they feel like they don't have the skill or the the technical like mind or brain to be able to process that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's really important to find that balance too, especially with film and with film in particular. You're creating a visual medium, so you need to be able still to visualize your film in a way that people are going to understand what you're trying to say, like in your story.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess I wanted to ask you, like, with everything that like you're exploring in terms of your visual style, like, do you think that you've nailed down what that is, like, in particular, or is it something that you're continually exploring, or rather you're open to continually explore it and you don't want to put it in just like one like definition?
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm definitely just starting out in my journey as a filmmaker. So it would be crazy if I already had like such a staunch idea of what my vision or what my style is like. But, I definitely think that I have my own kind of brand in terms of keeping it dark and keeping it moody. That's definitely something I'm interested in. And I think that for any emerging artist is to kind of pay attention to the things that draw you and that keep you coming back to a certain thing. Like, look at the common denominator between the movies that you really love or the music that you really love. There's probably like a common denominator there. And for me, it's definitely something that is like dark and moody and introspective and maybe has a bit of like a surrealist, like dream-like thing to it. So those are themes that I know I want to stick to in my journey. I think it'd be very surprising if I suddenly came out with a project that looked a lot like Barbie, for example. Like I'm more on the poor thing side, like we were discussing in the beginning, So it's kind of knowing what and again, kind of like fashion, like just knowing what your style is that you tend to gravitate towards too.
Yeah.
So for me personally speaking, it's definitely like the darker and moodier stuff.
I think hearing all of like your experiences, I can definitely tell that all your creative journey has been very, I'm not sure if cathartic is the right word, but it's just, yeah. It's
Yeah,
been,
definitely.
it's been quite a journey for
Yeah.
you just to be able to explore like different parts of yourself and Like,
No, absolutely.
yeah.
Everything that I go through, I'm like, well, at least it's for the art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's all one and the same. Like it fuels each other. The art fuels my experience and the experience fuels my art. So it is very cathartic for sure. Because if anything, if I go through hardships in my life or confusion or whatever it is, I'm like, well, at the end of the day, like I get to say that I'm like the cool heartbroken artist, man. Like I've been there, I've done it, and I have like all this fuel for my art. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's definitely cathartic. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I wanted to end the podcast by asking you if you were to, like, recalling everything that we've talked about in this episode, if you were to meet with your younger self who first started out their journey as a creative, like, what would you want to tell them, or how would you reassure them that
Ooh,
the journey's like everything's going to be okay? But
that is a loaded question because I might actually get emotional with this one.
Oh.
Because my journey to film has been such a crazy, serendipitous, full circle moment where before I was married and had children, I was trying to start my own videography business, like I said. And at the time, especially in Ottawa, I didn't really see a path in front of me. I believe there wasn't a film program at Algonquin yet. There was a television and broadcasting program, but I'm like, but I don't want to work for the news necessarily. So I didn't think of taking that. And my network was like non-existent. So I was like just trying to figure it out and like maybe use the internet or something. But then when I had kids, my dream of film kind of died. And that sounds horrible to say because I love my children and I wouldn't have it any other way. But it's balancing motherhood and film is like so hard because there's no such thing as quiet on set with kids around. You know what I mean? And I wasn't able personally to make that work. And honestly, I gave up. I didn't really think that I would ever get back into film. And it was just kind of like a very far off like aspiration. I was like, I don't know. I never thought it would actually happen for me. And then I kid you not, literally 2 months after my separation and I'm finding myself on my own, needing to find a new job and look out for myself and everything for the first time in like more than a decade. The first job I landed was in film. And that just still blows my mind to today. Like life is so crazy and unpredictable. So never give up, even if it feels like it's not happening for you right now. You have no idea what could happen 10 years from now if you just don't give up. Because there was a part of me that always still loved it and who kept the dream alive somewhere in there. And I kept the creativity alive. Even though I couldn't do film, I was doing visual arts, and that still was able to get me into film because I got into film through the art department.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened was like someone from my network saw that I was very involved in the arts. And when I was looking for work, they were like, hey, you have an artistic background. You'd probably do great in art department. And then I did one movie and they liked me. And then before I know it, I'm doing another movie and another movie. And now I work for art department. So it's like you never know what your way in is going to be. You don't know what's waiting for you. So just like don't give up on your dream because like I said, it could kind of land on your lap when you least expect it in a way that you really don't expect it. So yeah, I think that's what I would have told my younger self is just like, yeah, it's not happening for you right now, but like just don't give up on the dream. Like keep your artistry alive, even if it's in something that seems completely unrelated. If I had like done more photography maybe during that time, that would have been really helpful to me now. More so than pyrography maybe with film, So yeah, that's what I would tell my younger self.
Yeah. No, and like just hearing like all of your experiences, honestly, like even when we first met up until now, like recording this episode, I'm just really inspired by your story, and I was really excited to be able to chat with you. So I'm really grateful that I was able to have you on the podcast.
I really appreciate it, and thank you for giving me a platform to share my story.
Of course.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for engaging with us in this episode. To learn more about Digi60, visit us at digi60.org. Till next time, keep on emerging, and I'll see you on the other side of the wall.